Welcome to Our Small Majority, where we feature artists, historians, activists, and entertainers alike. I'm your host, Christian Black.
And I'm your co host, Matthew Goryczkowski. On February 19, 1942, Franklin D. Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066 after the tragic Pearl Harbor attack. Over 110,000 Japanese Americans were forced into concentration camps. Hatred, racism, and fear shrouded the perception of Asians in the United States. Chinese Americans would wear buttons on their chest to distinguish themselves from Japanese, so they wouldn't be attacked on the street. Even Dr. Seuss made comics portraying Japanese Americans as evil.
Today, we have the chance to speak with a survivor from these camps when he was only in grade school, Yukio Shimomura. And for 2.5 years, he and his family were moved around camps from California to Utah. After World War II, Yukio graduated high school in Utah and went to serve in the U.S. Army. He attended Weber State University and Utah State University, where he earned a bachelor's in manufacturing engineering. However, even at the age of 85, his time in the camps still affects him today.
As you're probably aware, Asian Americans are being attacked and demonized throughout the United States during this pandemic, especially in just the past few weeks. We wanted to speak with Yukio on the matter, his outlook on the future in a post Trump presidency, and how the Japanese American concentration camps compare to the immigration detention facilities along the US Mexican border. I wanted to actually start off by talking about what's been happening in the news lately. They've been talking about all these hate crimes against Asian Americans lately because of COVID and everything.
Mhm.
I was wondering if you saw that recently, like these past 2 weeks, it's been all over the news.
Yeah, I saw that, and it's very distressing. But the thing that we have to remember is that we're used as a scapegoat, is the way I feel, because anytime there's any issues with any Asian, all Asians are taken into consideration that, the face is the same, therefore we are the ones to blame. And unfortunately, that splashes onto everybody that has the same kind of face as myself, or faces that are similar, even though they're from different countries. And I think that just because Trump called the virus, the China virus, and alleged that China did it on purpose, really puts a bad slant on things. And so I'm very disappointed that the media or people have picked it up that way. And, it's just like the trial that's going on right now. My feeling is that what Trump did to propagate the information of the China virus, I really had problems with it. So I saw the two people that were letting us know what kind of violence or what kind of harassment was taking place with the Asians that were in the United States, the Asian Americans, if I could put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, how do you think that compares to what happened in the 1942 with the reaction then?
Well, it's the same thing, is that you get stereotyped into being the bad guy. And so let's go back in history a little bit. And when the Chinese were here with the railroad and the gold rush and all of that,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that they weren't allowed to vote, own property, or anything like that. And so then you bring it up to the Second World War. It's all the same, is that we don't look like the Caucasian, therefore we become the victims of discrimination, and that's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember stories of how Chinese Americans would wear, buttons and stuff back in 1942 after Pearl Harbor, having to say that they're not Japanese Americans, so that they wouldn't be attacked or discriminated against. And
that was the way that they could help themselves. And the interesting thing is that the Japanese were too proud to wear I'm a Chinese American button, and so that made it very much more identifiable that they were Chinese, and the people who didn't wear that button were Japanese or other Asians that were in the United States at that time.
Oh, I see. So they were so they could have hid behind that button, you're saying, if they wanted to?
Yeah, they could have if they really wanted to, because that was the badge that separated the Chinese Chinese from all of the Japanese. So it's just an interesting thing that happened during that time. So,
do you think they should have?
That's a trap question, and my feeling is that hey, let's put it this way: I am who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Japanese American or American Japanese, whatever way you want to put it, and the fact that I'm loyal to myself and my own pride, and my pride tells me I don't think so. I respect the Chinese that they wore that button, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. But I'm not about to compromise my ethnicity to accommodate not being harassed. If I get harassed, I get harassed, and that's unfortunate for the people who are harassing. They're culturally deprived, and that's unfortunate. So that's my way of looking at it. Mm-hmm. It's like African Americans or African. Their badge is their face and their the physical structure. And you can't hide behind it, and I can't hide behind what I look like. And so I am who I am, and so be it. And if there's anybody that wants to take me on because of my ethnicity, fine. As long as they don't get violent with me, I'm okay. I could take the words, the whole BS about sticks and stones and all that kind of thing. I'm past that stage for sure, and I've mellowed out. I guess is really what I'm saying. So,
right.
Anyway, that's my opinion about, it's really just unfortunate that we're put upon this earth as human beings, and the way I put it is, if I were in combat and somebody who was Asian needed a blood transfusion, I would provide it if we had the same blood type. And so that's the interesting thing, is we're all tied together by our blood, even though our faces are different. But from a skin point of view or a human body point of view, we're all the same. It's just that our souls come from the same place, is the way I would put it. And a lot of people don't understand that concept, and so it's an unfortunate situation that we're going through right now, and we seem to keep going over it and over again. The only thing I feel real good about is that the Black Lives Matter really, in the last few months, have changed significantly, just based on the fact that Caucasians have taken it upon themselves to see that all of the discrimination and the violence that had taken place against the African Americans was not fair. Therefore, they were in numbers more than the African Americans were in some of the protests, and that really spoke to me. So I felt real good about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I had a not to backtrack here, but I had a follow-up question about that button. Do you think that Chinese Americans wore that button more as a means of safety for their own safety that they weren't targeted? Or was there sort of some racism behind that too? Like we don't want to associate ourselves with Japanese Americans. I'm Chinese American.
Well, the answer is, in a general sense, is yes. The thing that we have to remember is how the Japanese nationals or Japan had gone to China and really was brutal in the way that they treated the Chinese. And so then, they're over here and they don't want to be discriminated along with the Japanese, let's say. So I think, a lot of it was loyalty to their own race, of course,
Hmm.
and not wanting to be harassed, because you can imagine some people that were harassing the Japanese came upon a Chinese person and says, "Oh, you're a Jap," and the response would be, "I'm Chinese." And would that relieve him of being not discriminated? I don't know,
Hmm.
because it's the face that does it all. And so, African American person to go into a Caucasian community, and it's the face, and that's the first thing that's a dead giveaway. And so then that gives them the right to harass you as much as what they think they want. And so the face is a very, dead giveaway as far as I'm concerned, and you and I know that, and where Matt can go into any kind of a community and and not be bothered by anybody until he might say he's a Jew. Then that and that has another dynamic. So in the old days, Italians were treated badly, Irish people were treated badly. But those days, in treating other white or Caucasian people, it's mostly over unless they get into a real tight community of conservatives. And if they find out that, your last name had a MAN behind it or anything that identifies you as a Jew, you might feel a little bit of concern. So anyway, I'm rambling on, and I apologize for that.
No, not at all.
Yeah, we met a filmmaker who worked on a reality TV show that never got made, but that never got released publicly yet, at least. And he was Jewish, but he infiltrated the KKK, and they were like helping the mothers and kids escape, but at the same time as a reality TV show. So the KKK allowed them to bring their camera equipment in and everything. Because they felt like it would help their numbers grow at the same time. That's why it hasn't been released, because how could you like, people are complaining that out of like however many thousand people watch it, some of them are going to be like, I want to join that.
Mm-hmm.
So they're court cases. But so he's Jewish, and he's able to hide that fact that he's Jewish, and he's right in the KKK. But the crew told him, like, do not mention anything about being Jewish or things are going to get bad.
Mm-hmm.
So he was right in there during like filming the cross burnings and everything, and they had no idea. And he's able to hide that.
Yeah, that's the difference, because if I said I wanted to join the KKK, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
The old terminology is, I'm a banana, let's say, okay, white on the yellow on the outside, white on the inside. It doesn't matter. My face is a dead giveaway. Christian's face is a dead giveaway. So anyway, we're pounding this to hell, but I that's how strong I feel about it. Is I go back to I am who I am. So anyway.
How do you feel about Trump finally leaving office?
I'll tell you what my personal feelings were. January the 6th was it was a horrendous day for me to experience what had happened at the Capitol, and it just showed me that there are a lot of people that are crazy, and and they let their emotions get carried away to the point where they'll destroy what's protecting them. Okay, as far as Trump leaving is concerned, I was totally relieved. We went through 4 years of leadership or non-leadership, and all of the psychologists, psychiatrists are saying that he's narcissistic. The biggest concern I had after all of that is that the Congress did not do anything, and they were too scared because he intimidated them so badly about what would happen if they didn't support him. And it's still happening, and it's unfortunate. This trial that's going on is reminiscent of how fearful they are, and so it's going to be a while before we could put him behind us. But then on the other hand, he's left a legacy that's really unfortunate, because a lot of people followed him like Hitler, and that's the concern I have. So, and one more last thing is that the pandemic, I felt really bad that Trump did not have any more empathy for the 400,000 people that passed away, or it's getting 450,000 now. And he had people brainwashed to the point where I put him in the same classification as Hitler. And that's a heavy duty indictment against the commander in chief or the president of the United States. So I'm unloading my feelings because I stored it up for 4 years, and I'm just totally relieved that he's out of the office. It's just I'd like to get him out of my face too. So
yeah, it still baffles me how people just are able to follow him and ignore everything, that all the crazy stuff that he's been doing and saying. I mean, I have people who are close to me, family members even, who who believe in him and want to see him back in office. And it's definitely like it puts a strain, because you want, if you're close to somebody and they're that brainwashed, you want to help them. But at the same time, it feels almost impossible to change their mind if after all this time they still believe in someone like that, And the ironic part is, my family is Jewish. They came from the Soviet Union as it was collapsing, right? So essentially, they left because Jewish people weren't able to find work, weren't able to get a good education, because they had it on their card, like they had on their passport that they were Jewish. So the second their job found out that they were Jewish, they weren't allowed to find work there. So my family came here in the 90s. What the ironic part is, most of them, and my family, I have a lot of friends who came from the Soviet Union during that time, their families and stuff. Their parents are heavy Trump supporters. So it's ironic that they left a place like that because they were being discriminated against, and they come here and they are basically doing the same thing to other people, or thinking the same way about other people. And it's baffling how that's possible. And I know it's and the Jewish community is split. There are a lot of Jewish people who support Trump.
The thing that comes to me is that, and I've been giving it a lot of thought as to why a person like Trump can influence and brainwash you to the point where you'll give up your right to be an American citizen. And I just feel like I wouldn't say people are damaged because of the way they think. I just think that he meets their certain needs that the individuals need. So you take the Jews, for example, and the fact that they're following Trump like they do, it's meeting their needs. And that's the thing that we have to understand is what are the needs that are being met so that then you could get more objective about it because you're really not baffled by what they believe in. You totally understand it after you hear what needs he's meeting, and then you say, well, all we have is a difference of opinion because from a human to human point of view, you know, he is who he is. He says what he thinks. He comes from a significantly damaged background himself, and being as damaged as he was, he learned from his father how to influence and motivate and manipulate people's thinking, and he's a master at it. And he's got how many million people following him, and that's the hard part, is to accept what the rationale is as to why he is who he is. So, you know, that's the only way I can really live through that whole situation. I give him a lot of credit for being a supermarketeer, but on the other hand, he's a very, very, very damaged person from a psychological point of view. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. And the people around him who are helping him get to that position too.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate part is that, you know, people like McConnell and the other leadership people in Congress, he's got him. His manipulation got him. And so then you have to say what's gotten into them that they have a need to have to follow somebody like him, where it takes them out of complete objective thinking, and that's the tough part. Okay, Christian, I haven't heard from you. How are you doing?
I just sit and listen most of the time with things, and then I'm like, ooh, I have a good question. But I do have a question for you. So the other night, actually, I can use a real life example for this one. Me and my parents were just discussing what does it mean being an American? Because we were talking about all sorts of, you know, different things when it comes to how people are viewing Black History Month this month. And I read a report that there was a school in Utah that gave parents the option. You saw it. So I was like, how can you? And then, so we were just having a whole discussion about it. And like, how can you be like half-baked? I'm here for these people. I know that they were oppressed, but we don't really have to learn about it. Like, do we have to endorse our children to learn about Black history? Can we opt out of it? And it just went down inside this whole rabbit hole of like, what does the American flag even mean? And,
okay, I hear what you're saying. And my son told me about the article, and then I found it on in the news, and the guy's name is Ishikawa, and I think I know his mother.
Wow.
Because I used to live in Ogden myself. Okay, right after the war, we moved to Ogden, Utah, and then you have to take into consideration the influence of the LDS Church being there, and that. And I'm going to go out on a limb right now, but I'll say it because this is my own personal experience with it, in that they didn't allow African or African Americans to participate in the church's deepest process by getting into the priesthood. And that was because I think the church originated from the South and Missouri, let's say, and in the process, they allowed themselves to discriminate early on based on one leader that they had. Brigham Young made the change to not allow Black people to be ordained into the priesthood. Okay, so based on that, going back to the 1800s and then bringing it forward, and then they had a revelation in the church that says, okay, now it's okay to allow African descendants to be allowed into the priesthood. But in the meantime, in those decades and hundreds of years, they were allowed to put the Africans into a position of, and they even made a comment that I remember so distinctly, is that Africans are only 60% of a human compared to Caucasians, and a lot of people believe that. They thought Africans were always put into a subservient position because the old Cain and Abel story that they had that somebody made up along the way. Now, that superintendent or the principal of the school, Ishikawa, got the request from a few parents to not participate in the Black Lives Matter or the month, let's say. And I think he was under pressure just to say, let's do it. But then on the other hand, he knew in his heart that something was screwed up about their request. And I'm glad that they turned it around, but it got national news, and it's unfortunate because it forces people to really come to grips with the fact that this kind of significant discrimination exists. And you get into the rural parts of the United States, and it's significant. It's very significant. They use the N word as if it's another word in their vocabulary, and they have no compunction to eliminate it from their vocabulary. And so my feelings were when I saw that is, yep, it's consistent and it's unfortunate. They're going to have to learn their lesson the hard way and be embarrassed about what they went through. But it's a lesson that the whole state of Utah is going to get out of this because it hit national news. So I thought to myself, well, if that's the way they're going to have to learn, that's the way they're going to have to learn it. Because, you know, even in Utah, you weren't allowed to have interracial marriages until I think it was in the 40s or 50s for sure. So I'm glad you brought that up because there's discrimination amongst, you know, with Asians that are even in Utah, and I've been through it myself because I've been japped a lot in Utah. So it's a good point. Thanks for bringing it up.
Of course. Yeah, it just blew me away when I read that. I was like, how can you cut out that is history, and that's the thing that people don't connect together? And there was like a response to this post. It was like, well, can I opt out of white history? Like, you know, you can't just opt out of an important piece of history. And when we're trying to come to a consensus and you're saying that you want to be educated, you can't pick and choose what you can be educated on. So
the interesting thing, you know, to add to what you're saying is, you know who Curry is, right? Warrior? Okay. His latest ad in the paper and the television is he puts up February as Black Lives Matter, right? He's got a card, and then he says in March Black Lives Matter, and in April Black Lives Matter. Every month is a Black Lives Matter. Let's not just use one month as a way to illuminate the problems that we have, because we can't. We're done shoving it under the rug, and because the way I put it is, if you take somebody I always use the war scene as an illustration. If 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 you were in a position where you get wounded and you need mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and this black guy comes up to you and says, "I can help you," and are you going to say, "No, I don't want you to help me because I'd rather die rather than for you to kiss my lips," kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, come on, give me a break. And then the other one that I use during my presentation is, let's say that you're in the hospital, this guy that you've been in the company with needs a blood transfusion. That's another one. Oh no, I don't want black blood in my system. I'd rather die before I get my blood transfusion from you. And I think, okay, if that's how you feel, man, if that's the way you want to go, that's fine. So those are things that really brings it to heart. When I do the presentation, I know I shock people when I say, well, it's like a Muslim, Muslim comes in with a turban on his head or whatever garment that he wears, and he says, I have the same blood type as you, and I'm going to provide you with the blood to save your life. Oh no, it's okay. I'd rather die, kind of thing. So anyway, I'm trying to keep it simple so that then people get the point of what the hell, this all this discrimination stuff leads to. So I'm getting worked up, as you can tell.
Right. No, not a problem at all. I mean, I think our biggest challenge now is just trying to find a middle ground. Because both in the African American community, the Black community, however you want to label it, and then even people who want to be allies, there's still plenty of distrust that's there. There's still plenty of, you can't say that. That's a microaggression. You can't, say, well, we don't have to talk about that because, all right, we've already been through slavery. No, like we've only touched the iceberg of it. If you want to talk about just public education slavery, like some schools, even in the South, they refer to slavery as workers, not slaves. Like, even that sort of vernacular, that sort of vocabulary that's being thrown around is important. And I feel like that's the biggest challenge that we face right now, both when it comes to different generations, like my generation, younger generations, and then even my parents' generation, and then even amongst ourselves too. And sometimes it can be overwhelming. Yeah, but what would you suggest to people who are trying to be like allies? Who are saying, hey, I'm a minority group too, I'm trying to help you, towards like maybe the Black community, or even if I was being put inside your shoes, like say there was a huge revolution to sort of dismantle Japanese encampment, and they're saying, what can we do to help? What would be some key things that you will want that person to ask you?
Well, the whole thing is to be true to your heart, because we're dealing with another human being, and being human says that we've been granted an opportunity to live on Earth, and why kill ourselves over trivial bullshit of having different faces, different attitudes? As long as we can get along, my feeling is, so if somebody says, I'm with you, I said, okay, let's do this and let's do that, and let's see where it goes. And if you come up with your own personal internal resistances, let's work on it. My mother was very, she was very opinionated about race. And I've had to work out each piece of my own personal things that I've had feelings about. And so every one of us have to have the same thing. As much as, African Americans, do they trust white people? Well, you want to always be trusting, but you can always also be skeptical too, because that's what's going to save you if something goes south. And so, there are a lot of, I would put it, do-gooders, and it could only be temporary because it's a stylish thing to do. What we're looking for are people who really feel it in their soul, because they see each other as humans rather than we see each other from a racial, ethnic point of view. So it's a hard process to go through because you have to do a lot of internal searching and discovery, and you may not like what you see or feel about yourself, but then on the other hand, you have to put yourself in the other person's shoes to say, what are they experiencing? So anyway, I'm rambling on now, but you understand what I'm trying to say.
Definitely.
Before we all got cut off here, you're saying like figure out why, some of us have to figure out why we care, right? Like search deep down inside and truly understand. And that's something that I, as a white guy talking, literally making films about this, have been kind of wondering and like fighting back and forth, right? Like I know why I care, but I'm like, am I the right person? Like when we made the documentary, right? Like we're getting into a lot of festivals lately, but I'm like this white director who's getting into these Asian American film festivals, right? Like,
well, if you want my opinion, I'll give it to you. I don't care if you were purple. I care that you care, and that's what comes through. And your films would indicate the degree in which you care. And between you and Christian and your other crews, there's a high level of sensitivity that comes through. And so when you see the end results of what your efforts are, it really doesn't matter whether you're white, purple, or yellow, brown. It doesn't really matter as far as I'm concerned, because you were the director or the cinematographer or whatever the hell, So all I can say is, I'll let you have a moment of being self-conscious about the fact that you're white, but it really doesn't matter, because if you look at all of the directors in the past of significant films, their product is what spoke rather than their own ethnicity or the color. So I'll give you a moment, and that's the only time I'll give you, because
I think about it all the time.
See, I don't want that thought process to get in the way of what you can contribute, because what you can contribute to me is more important than, because you are a body with a soul that's concerned. And so we don't even see you as far as your end product is concerned. We see your name, and because you're so sensitive about stuff that you cover, I'll say, okay, you had your moment of being self-conscious. Okay, let's move on.
Mm-hmm.
I'll see what I can do about that.
No,
ain't nothing to see about.
That is a bullshit response. It's just like saying to Christians, okay, just because you're black, should you cover black people? Because you are an authority just by who you are. Okay. And so then you start worrying about Japanese people, and you say, well, I'm going to do some Japanese work. Well, it's your work. Mm-hmm. And that's what would come through. So you guys have to not worry about it. And if somebody asks you, what the hell are you guys doing covering this? You say, thank you very much for your consideration. And I feel like this is my journey, my way of showing concern for Earth, and therefore I'm taking the opportunity to do what I think is is right. So that just let it go at that shit. It's it's something to be proud of that you can be that far along in your empathetic thinking and feeling process. So, you know, you got my vote as far as I'm concerned.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I've had a lot of time to think during the pandemic, as all of us have, and we're ready for it to end, and we have a lot of work to do after after this is all over. We've just been waiting on it.
I was just thinking, you know, I was thinking about what you just said a few minutes ago. I think to myself, what are you gonna do? Paint your face a different color every time you cover different people? Come on, give me a break, you know. So anyway, enough of that.
Oh man. Well, here's a question I can coin to the both of you because I thought it was very interesting. I was discussing this an extension after we talked about what happened in Utah inside of my house. We were talking about the American flag being hung either outside of your house, like on your porch or whatever, or on your, like, you know how some people like to have it on their truck and have it waved around and stuff like that, blah blah. And I don't know about anyone else, but it entices anxiety almost usually, because the American flag shouldn't symbolize anxiety and like, wait, is that a Trump supporter, or wait, is that somebody who is a little bit too patriotic, or is that someone who it gives you already pre-notions that you're proud to be an American, and now that's shameful. And I wanted to get your perspective on that, because I know not only inside my household, but a lot of friends and colleagues of mine, they're like, oh yeah, if I see somebody like they have like a flag hanging on their truck or whatever, or like outside their house and stuff, it makes me feel some type of way. So I wanted to know if that sort of enticer of that made you feel something, especially after, you know, post Trump. Has it changed from MAGA flags to just American flags? So
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because at my brother's funeral, he served in the Army for quite a while. In fact, it was over 20 years of service. Okay. He was also, he signed up when he was 18 years old. He was a prisoner of war during the Korean War. And when he passed away, we had a military person come and present the flag to the family. I have that flag. I have it in the triangular box that that we get, you know, after the flag's folded. You know how you fold it up to try. I put 2 years in the service. My other brother, put 2 years or 3 years in the service. He went in. He was drafted out of the camp, and he served and he ended up in Japan in the service. I feel like I'm fairly patriotic. I feel like Trump put a stain on his translation of being patriotic. It was more like he wanted to be the king rather than he wanted to be the president of the United States. When somebody demonstrates their patriotism, I'll say fine, but I want to hear what their patriotism is all about. And you look at somebody like Kaepernick, and he did what he could in the NFL to let people know how he felt about how the African Americans were being treated in the United States with the police and things like that. And he knelt down, and I felt so proud of him. And unfortunately, he got wiped out as far as his career is concerned. And now the president of the NFL is apologizing for what he did. But, Kaepernick's career is over as far as football is concerned. So his is the kind of patriotism that I like. And if it were me, I would kneel down at any event. So when it comes to the flag, it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And my feeling is that I want you to give me the benefit of the doubt to be able to express myself as to what my patriotism is. And I'll let you explain to me what yours is. But if you start going on the tirade of how you love Trump and his Make America Great Again, I'll say thank you. I'm listened enough. I'll turn around and walk away because their level of understanding what patriotism is totally distorted. So when you think about it, I don't trivialize the flag at all. I look up. I like it. I love it. I love the Star Spangled Banner. It's unfortunate that after the African Americans came back from the Second World War, they came back to the same bullshit that they had to face before they went and served for their country. It's unfortunate that they weren't treated like another human citizen of the United States. And it's taken so many years for them to earn the right to be treated equally and still not being treated equally in a lot of areas. So when somebody says they're patriotic, I'll ask them, okay, tell me what you're patriotic about, and we'll see if it meets up my standard of what patriotism is all about. So I get, you could tell I could get pretty emotional about this. So that's my opinion. And, I'm just a small peanut in a big gallery. And so
I remember
anyway, thanks for the question.
I remember during our interview that we did a while ago for the documentary, one of the last things you said was that the U.S. is you think the U.S. is the greatest country in the world, right? And it's clear how patriotic you are about the U.S. There's no question about it. And I'm just wondering how can you still feel that way after everything that's happened, with the Japanese American concentration camps in 1942, and what happened then, and all the things still going on today, especially with the immigration facilities at the border right now, and like the children's separation. Like, where does that patriotism come from, and feeling of this is the greatest nation in the world, even though we still do all these terrible things?
Well, what I share in the presentation is there's a lot of blemishes as far as the United States is concerned, and it goes back to how they got the land away from the indigenous people. 1, 2, how the genocide that occurred, and then how they brought all the slaves over to the United States at unwilling people, and the way that they were brought over here and how they were treated, and now then the way that other people have been treated throughout the history. But taking all of that into consideration, you have to rise above. At least you have to rise above the BS that goes on and how we treat each other. I don't like the way that Mexican people or you know, how the people are treated, separating the kids from their parents, and how they got incarcerated. There's a lot of things that I don't like about what's going on, for sure. But on the other hand, I've been given a lot of privileges myself, and I don't think that the privileges that I've been given talk me out of the way that the United States treats certain people, certain situations. Is it still the best country in the world? Compared to every other country in the world, people are treated with some degree of dignity, but there's a lot of people who aren't still being treated with dignity, and that bothers me. So it's not a perfect world. It's for me, I've been lucky to live the existence that I have. And, so yeah, I think about that a lot, to say, you know, when I think about the fact that there are some subtle things that go on in my life that I don't feel like I'm treated like any other person, and I think that Christian and I would agree that on the West Coast it's more subtle, and it's whereas you go in the Midwest and you go out in the East or down South anyway, you're treated differently. But then you say, I want to be treated the way I'm treated in the West Coast. I like the way I'm being treated in the West Coast, and so I'll stay where I'm treated best. But yet I have very strong feelings about the way other people are treated in the United States. So Is it the best country in the world? Yeah, with reservation.
I'll take that. I mean, one thing I think my father would disagree with that statement when it comes to the West Coast, because my dad said this one statement that still sticks with me today. He said, "I'd rather stick to my life in Alabama, Mobile, just by race and racism alone, because at least I know you're not two-faced and you're not talking from the side of your neck. I know not to talk to you rather than be stabbed in the back later." Which he said is something that he comes across a lot out here in California.
Yeah, I agree with what your father said. Totally. Than to be treated in a subtle way where I keep guessing at how I'm going to be treated. I'll give you a good illustration of that. I'll go into a restaurant, and my antenna's up all the time. Okay, it's just a natural phenomenon, the way I've been treated. I'll go into a restaurant, and then I'll let them take my reservations, or I'll be seated at the table. My clock starts running as soon as I sit down, or whether my name gets called on the reservation list or not, or whether they skip my name and go to another, person's reservation. And I have a high level of sensitivity as to how much time there is between the time that the maitre d' puts the menu in front of me until I'm waited on. And then I look to see the quality of how the wait person waits on me, as to whether I'm treated with respect, dignity, or I'm treated with non-respect. So that happens to me in any restaurant in the United States, whether it's in the South or where, West Coast or whatever. So I'd have to agree with your father as to how he may feel, because his antenna's up all the time. And I sense that he goes through what I go through, is, okay, let's see what happens now, and go from there. Because I've walked out of many, many restaurants because it's like I waited too long, and then the maitre d' asked me, "What's the matter?" I said, "Well, you guys don't want to wait on me. Fine, I get my ass out of here, because it's not worth my time to worry about whether you're going to wait on me. And so I'm out of here. He says, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, that's bullshit. You should have taken care of me as soon as I walked in the door. And I look to see if the waitress or waiter is busy, and whether they're hurting for help because they don't have enough help. But then on the other hand, I know and I sense that I'm not being waited on because of who I am. So yeah, your dad and I would get along pretty good.
Most likely. Yes. Most likely. Yeah. I feel like the difference between his generation and then mine when it comes to African Americans is the more what one struggle is, because he always talks about our generation. It's like, man, you guys can go, you have so many opportunities, you can walk inside rooms, you can do this, you can do that. He was walking out of the tail end of that, like they were just now taking off the signs of, colored and white.
Yeah.
So I feel like that for me, the issue that I see most of the time, especially in academia or like any professional setting, is it's more of the token Black person, or more of the poster child.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're the only Black person in here. You're the only Black person inside of this field of neuroscience. You should be able to speak about how, Black people's physiology is a little bit different than everyone else's. And it's like, well, I'm not an expert on it, but I can't give you, A, B, and C. But even that alone too, that's a microaggression. And that's racist, whether you feel like that it's a compliment or not.
Well, like if you walked into a restaurant with a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman, then tell me what the hell's going on when that happens. You're going to get the attention of the whole restaurant sometimes. And then the question is whether you get waited on in a timely basis and in a quality basis or not. See, so, that's where the subtlety occurs, where if somebody treats you with respect and dignity from the time that you walk in the restaurant till you get served and you're done and you walk out, then you feel like, well, that was a good experience. But I would venture to guess that you rate how you get waited on all the time.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Anyways, yeah. I do, yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether you're at a fast food restaurant or not. It's always the antenna. My personal feeling is my antenna is up all the time, and so I can sense what your dad's gone through, but you're the one that would be surprised as to what, if you got treated wrong, it would be less than how your dad was treated. So anyway, I don't know what your mother goes through.
Oh yeah, she's a whole different case. Yeah, because her mother is from Arkansas.
Oh boy.
So yeah, so having that background, and then now she goes down to Texas a lot, because that's where her entire family is, either in Texas, or our aunt just moved to Minnesota, which is interesting too. I've been over there. Yeah, she has. It's pretty much lined up with my father, unfortunately. Because she's experienced all sorts of backhanded compliments, or blatant racism too, like being pulled over every single time we take a road trip to go to visit our family in Texas. So yeah, it's unfortunate.
Well, the thing is, it takes a real poor choice of words, but it takes a lot of maturity to deal with how you're treated if you're treated wrong, so that then you help shape that person's mind as you're talking to that person, to say, I didn't appreciate how you treated me, or whatever, and so unfortunately, you have to train your children as to how to deal with it. My grandchildren two of them are African American father, and my daughter Tamiko. My son-in-law's name is Ray Arbuckle. And my granddaughter was at University of Oregon. University of Oregon is quite liberal. Mm-hmm. University of Oregon is a pocket of liberalism, and outside of Eugene, Oregon, it gets very conservative real quickly as you go out into the radius of the city. But she was called the N-word on campus, and it really had an effect on her, and because she lived, living in San Jose is pretty protected as far as the atmosphere is concerned. And there was other couple of incidences where she was not treated right. And what they did was they had a big rally in University of Oregon, and the president took it upon himself to really pull the whole school together and really did right by them, by the people that were being discriminated. And then they started changing the names of the buildings of people who used to support slavery and things like that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so these are signs that it's progress, but it's been slow. It's like taking down all of the monuments of the Southern generals and things like that. And then there's still a lot of people who resist it. Mm-hmm. And those are the people that you want to see out in the open, is the people who resist it, because then you know who they are. And so anyway, I'm sort of rambling right now, but you get my drift.
Definitely. I mean, I think that it's definitely beneficial, because some people argue like, no, completely destroy it. I don't want to see it anymore. I don't want it to exist. But where I stand on that argument when it comes to preserving statues or monuments or things like that of like, like Robert E. Lee, and how he was a slave owner. I feel like that should be preserved and put inside of a museum so people can learn about it.
Yeah.
So rather it being glorified and, oh, this was one of the founders of our city. Yeah, founded because of who? Because of what workers? So, so I think that it's important to visit those types of things, like historical figures that were key roles inside slavery, both positive and negative. And it's the same thing that extends towards Latin American history, that expands towards Japanese American history. Like, everyone should go to Manzanar. Like, everyone should go and educate themselves, because when you mention Japanese internment camps, I know a lot of people that'll be like, what was that? Which is unfortunate. Yeah. And I feel like that should have its own section when we're learning about World War II. And we don't skip over Pearl Harbor. We went over there. No, what were you doing over here while you went over there? Yeah. So I feel like that us picking and choosing history is causing the most damage today.
Yeah. So. No, you're right. I agree with what you're saying. I guess being 85 years old, I've seen a lot. And now what you're getting to see is what the future looks like. And parts of it's good, parts of it is they're still hurting. A lot of people are hurting. And so, and you're in a position where you're academically strong, so then you have an idea to think it through too. So, and then both of you are such that you're the eyes and ears that can look into things that a lot of people would just as soon not have to look at. But you're helping people discover the truth of the way things really are or were, and bring it out into the light. And so this is where you're providing a service.
Before the pandemic, Yukio traveled all over the United States giving presentations about his time in the concentration camps. That's actually how Christian and I met Yukio. We attended one of his presentations at UCI and connected with him. I made a short documentary with Yukio called Within Their Gates, which is played at several film festivals and even won some awards. This weekend, it'll be playing at the Nichi Bay Foundation's Films of Remembrance program. It'll be online and free with a student ID. We'll link it in the description of this episode.
Join us next week for another episode of Little White Lies. Oh, and don't forget to follow us on whatever listening platform you're listening to right now, so you can always be notified whenever we release new episodes.
Also, we'd love it if you'd leave a review for us if you're enjoying the show. We want to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.